Chapter 12. Crystal Window. Before going out onto the street, Vir Norin examined himself in the mirror. He tried not to stand out among the inhabitants of the capital, and imitated them even in his gait. People of excellent build and powerful muscles on Tormance were, in general, not so rare. Professional athletes, wrestlers, ball players, circus strongmen. But perhaps an observant eye would have distinguished Vir Norin from them by the lightning-fast reaction with which he moved through the crowd. Vir Norin was on his way to the Biomedical Institute. The scientists of Yanyak combined these two branches of natural sciences. On the street, everything was subject to the haste of an endless stream of passers-by, driven by the constant fear of being late because of the inability to manage their time, because of the poor work of transport and points of distribution, or rather of sale of goods. The men hurried uneasily. Women, thin as stalks, walked with an uneven gait, spoiled by uncomfortable shoes, dragging bags of groceries beyond their strength. These were the loli. The sholi went decidedly faster. The shadows of fatigue were already furrowing their faces. Mudslides swelled up under their eyes. Wrinkles of bitterness surrounded their dry, chapped lips. All women, as a rule, hunched their shoulders, hiding their breasts, ashamed of them. Those who walked too proudly and directly belonged to those who sold themselves for money or a secure life, and an ordinary woman who walked boldly with a beautiful posture could at any moment be insulted. In a striking way, this sexual savagery coexisted alongside luxuriously furnished houses of food, where at late hours, and for an expensive fee, topless, if not completely naked girls, danced, sang, and even served food. Very uneven, unstable social and personal relationships, in which a sense of human dignity and care was replaced by anger and dirty cursing, an inexplicable mixture of good and bad people. All this reminded Vir Norin of an unregulated device, when behind the glass of the tested indicator, peaks and troughs alternate in a bizarre dance. Vir Norin was always glad if, among the multitude of oncoming passers-by, equally oppressed by fatigue or care, he came across pure, dreaming eyes, tender or melancholy. In this way it was possible, without any DPE, to distinguish good people from devastated and wilted souls. He had told Tale about this. The engineer had objected that such a superficial observation was only suitable for primary selection. Psychological resilience, depth and seriousness of aspirations, prior life experience, remained unknown. The astronavigator had agreed, but continued to eagerly search for these signs of real life in the thousands of passers-by he met. The institute, which invited Vir Norin, occupied a new building with a simple and clear architectural form. Everything spoke to the fact that inside there would be a good combination of convenience and service. Huge windows gave a lot of light. Too much, thought Vir Norin, in the absence of dimming devices and light filters. But the thin walls did not protect from street noise, the ceilings were low, and the ventilation was poor. However, stuffiness and crampedness were everywhere the constant companions of life in the city of the center of wisdom. The old buildings, built before the housing crisis, at least had massive walls and high floors, so they were both quieter and cooler. The lilac guard in the lobby jumped up obsequiously on seeing the card of the Council of the Four. The first deputy director came down from the top floor and kindly showed the earthly guest around the institute. On the third, biophysical floor, computers calculated devices similar in effect to the reticular comparators of Earth. The astronavigator was led into a passageway lit by dim pinkish lamps, the left wall of which was composed of a window of solid crystal transparent glass several meters long, separating the corridor from the laboratory. The huge hall, completely devoid of natural light, low, supported by 4 square columns, would have looked like the stopped-out horizon of an underground mine, if not for the streaks of bluish glowing tubes in the ceiling and the silvery gray decoration of the smooth walls. Dull monotony, rows of identical tables and consoles, men and women in yellow robes and hats bent over the tables in poses of extreme concentration. Vir Norin was able to notice that people took these positions as soon as the deputy director appeared in the aisle. The Tormansian chuckled contentedly. Conveniently invented. Walking around here, we, the administrators, keep an eye on everyone who works. There are a lot of idlers. It is necessary to whip them on. There are no other ways? Vir Norin asked. This is the best and most humane. Is that how it works in every laboratory? And each, if the institute is located in a new building. The old ones are much more poorly equipped, and we, the bosses, have a harder time. Scientists jabber on during work time about all sorts of nonsense, do not value the time that belongs to the state. One needs to check them more often. Apparently the science of Yan Yak, like all other types of activity, was of a compulsory character. Knowledge broken into small fragments interested people no more than any other work in which one cannot see the meaning and purpose. Only the academic degree and the position that gave privileges carried any significance. Scraps of scientific information obtained in rank-and-file institutes were processed and used by scientists of the highest class, who worked in better equipped and inaccessible like a fortress, institutes guarded by the lilacs. All talented to whichever degree, scientists were gathered in the capital and 2 or 3 large cities on both shores of the equatorial ocean. Norin had come to such an institute of the highest class in search of genuine intellectuals, seekers of knowledge in the name of the happiness of mankind of Yan Yak, such as Engineer Tail and his friends. The astronavigator and deputy director walked around the building. All laboratories were built homotypically, differing only in the equipment and the number of employees. Let's return to the section of computers, Vir Norin suggested. The calculated apparatus interested me. If ye will allow me, I will question the biophysicists. They won't be able to tell you much. Now they are busy characterizing the flows of input and output. It would seem a simple thing, but it has not yet been possible to grasp the quantitative relationships. Do ye know the purpose of the device? Of course. I have no data on your competence, but I will try to explain, the deputy director remarked importantly. The latticed or reticular structure of the brain translates stable associations into consciousness. Excuse me, but this on Earth has long been known. I am only interested in the purpose of the apparatus. We have something similar that serves to select the most effective combination of people in work groups of narrow purpose. Painfully difficult. We need a device for the recognition and subsequent excretion of recurrent associations, which inevitably recur in all people without exception. For many, they are so strong that they create a stable resistance to the introduction of wisdom and the cultivation of love for the Great One. The deputy director automatically bent over in a respectful bow. Everything is clear, said Vir Norin in an icy tone. Thank ye. Indeed, there is no reason to go to the laboratory. Our scientists want to see ye, the deputy director said hastily, but now they are scattered across their workplaces. We will have to wait for everyone to gather. Maybe ye will come to our workshop? This is the name of our evening meetings, where we have fun, hold discussions, or arrange viewings of some spectacles. Well, the astronavigator smiled. Apparently, I will be the entertainment, the spectacle, and the discussion. Oh, don't say that. The deputy director became embarrassed. Our people want to talk with the earthly colleague to question ye and answer your questions. Fine. Vir Norin agreed and did not start to delay him with inquiries, realizing that the administrator needed to carry out appropriate preparation. I'll come in the evening. He headed for the main post office. There, as the residents of the capital proudly informed, modern machines operated. They issued letters by 6 374-digit characters, instantly sorting the arriving correspondence for those who did not want to use video network for fear of divulging their personal secrets. People did not know that at the slightest suspicion, the letters were thrown into a nearby machine, which scanned and recorded the contents onto film. With the calling of the code, the recipient was automatically photographed on the same film. Other machines gave all manner of information, up to the identification of abilities and advice in choosing the type of work needed in the capital. The old, well-built post office building consisted of a gigantic hall surrounded by automatic machine consoles. Slightly glowing hieroglyphs above each console explained in detail what manipulations had to be carried out in order to receive correspondence, advice, or help. Obviously, the Tormansian schools did not teach how to use public machines. Instructors dressed in brown uniforms walked through the hall ready to help the visitors of the post office. They walked around with a haughty, inaccessible look, imitating the 2 lilacs located at different ends of the hall. Vir Norin did not notice visitors turning to these arrogant and unkind advisors. Sju-Te had been right in saying that they produced in her a repulsive impression. They exuded anger and soul emptiness. These were the non-humans from ancient Russian fairy tales, outwardly in human form, but with a soul completely destroyed by special training. They would do whatever was ordered without thinking or feeling anything. Vir Norin approached the machine for the identification of abilities, trying to imbue the feelings of a Tormansian who had come to the capital from afar. The farther from the center, the worse things were in terms of education and standard of living, in order to find here a renewal of his life. He performed the manipulations listed in the table. An orange light flashed in a window upstairs, and a dispassionate voice barked out to the whole room. Mental abilities low, mental development below average, dim and stupid, but muscle response excellent. I advise you to look for a job as a local transport driver. Vir Norin looked at the machine in bewilderment. The indicators of the high control panel went out, and the light in the upper window disappeared. From behind him came laughter, and the astronavigator looked back. Several people were approaching the machine. Seeing Vir Norin's confusion, they understood it in their own way. "What's it with you? As if lost. What, maybe driving work is not good for you? Such a beefy dolt. Come on, don't delay," they shouted, nudging the astronavigator slightly. Vir Norin wanted to tell them that such a description did not correspond to his idea of himself, but realized that it was useless to explain, and went to the almost deserted part of the hall where books and newspapers were sold. However, he quickly realized the seeming absurdity of the conclusions of the automaton. The machine was programmed in accordance with the norms of Tormance. It had not been able to understand indicators that had risen beyond the upper level, and inevitably counted them outside the lower level. The same would have happened to a Tormansian of outstanding ability, an objective law of capitalist society leading to the arrow of Ahriman. In the local literature, they wrote much more about the bad than about the good. The word for evil and dark carried more information than the word for good and lightsome, because everyday experience quantitatively gained more bad. For the same reason, it was easier to believe bad and evil. Evil was more convincing, more visible, more affected the imagination. Films, books, and poems of Tormance spoke incomparably more about cruelty, murder, violence than about goodness and beauty, which were also more difficult to describe because of the poverty of words concerning love and the beautiful. Clashes and violence had become the basis, the content of every piece of local art. Without this, the inhabitants of Tormance showed no interest in a book, film, or painting. However, there was one indispensable condition. All the terrible, all the blood and suffering had to either relate to the past or depict collisions with invading enemies from outer space. It was customary to portray the present as a calm and incredibly happy kingdom under the wise power of the lords. Only in this way, and not otherwise. For the Tormansian, contemporary art was devoid of any interest. "A deaf boredom from this art is spreading all over the planet," Sju-Te had once aptly said. The cause of all these phenomena was one. There had always been more bad in this world than good. The amount of difficulties, misfortunes, boredom, and grief, according to the approximate calculations of Earth's Academy of Grief and Joy for the EDW, had exceeded happiness, love, and joy 15 to 18 times in an oblique cut of the average level of spiritual needs. Probably on Tormance now it was the same. The experience of generations accumulating in the subconscious becomes predominantly negative. This is the power of evil, the power of Satan, as religious people said in ancient times. The more ancient the people were, the more this negative experience accumulated in it, like entropy. The Tormansians, the descendants and brothers of the Earthlings, had lived an extra 2 millennia in disorder, under the blows of the arrow of Ahriman, and in the denial of good, they were far more ancient than humanity of Earth. Sighing in disappointment, Vir Norin looked around and met the eyes of a girl leaning on the ledge of the wall near the bookstore. Huge eyes, a childishly thin neck, and very small hands, nervously sorting through sheets of yellow paper, obviously of a letter. Norin picked up her feeling of restless anguish. Occasional large tears, one after another, rolled from under the girl's long eyelashes. A keen, hitherto unexperienced compassion stung the astronavigator. Not daring to immediately speak to the stranger just like that, he wondered how to help her grief. Darker than that of the inhabitants of the capital, her skin betrayed her as an inhabitant of the tail hemisphere. A short and light dress revealed slender, strong legs. The strange hair color, black with an ash tint, stood out from the usual black with a reddish tint of the Tormansian and was in harmony with the girl's gray eyes. Post office visitors scurried around. Men sometimes looked at her insolently. The girl turned away or lowered her head, pretending to be deep in the letter. The more Vir Norin regarded the stranger, the more he felt in her a spiritual depth, which he rarely met in Tormansians, usually devoid of self-upbringing and psychic culture. He realized that she was on the verge of great trouble. Vir Norin knew that to easily approach a liked by him, someone and begin to talk to them was impossible here. The emotional tenderness so natural on Earth caused on Tormance only alertness and repulsion. The older people, from the lowly, were afraid that the person who tried to converse with them would turn out to be a secret spy of the state, a provocateur looking for imaginary anti-government conspirators from those who had passed the test of the meeting with the serpent. Younger women were afraid of men. Reflecting, Vir Norin again met the gaze of the stranger and smiled at her, putting into this smile all the suddenly born sympathy and willingness to come to aid. The girl shuddered. For a second her face hardened, and in her eyes rose an impenetrable veil. But the power of kindness, with which the eyes of the earthling shone, won. She sorrowfully and weakly smiled in answer, reminding Vir Norin of a character from the historical frescoes in the Museum of the Last Hellas on the island of Chios. The Tormansian woman was now looking at him attentively and in surprise. Vir Norin approached her so quickly that the girl stepped back in fright and stretched out her hand as if intending to push him away. "Who are you?" "Completely different." The Tormansian looked at the astronavigator again and repeated, "Completely different." "No wonder," Vir Norin smiled. "I have come from far away." "Very. However, here I am in safety, but what is it that threatens ye? What misfortune has befallen ye?" And he pointed to the sheet of the letter. "How funnily you speak. I'm after all not of the tall people of the capital." The girl smiled and, struggling with coming tears, added, "Everything with me has collapsed. I have to go back, and for this—" She fell silent and turned away, raising her head to the cast-iron frieze and pretending to examine the intricate ligature of hieroglyphs and snakes. Vir Norin took the small, weathered hand. The Tormansian looked at her own palm, as if wondering how it had ended up in such a large hand. Very soon, Vir Norin knew everything. Sju-Te, or Sju-Te, came from the tail hemisphere, from a city unknown to the astronavigator, where for some important reason, he did not ask, she could no longer stay. She had come to the capital to visit her brother who worked at a foundry. Her brother was the only one with Sju-Te in the world. He had dreamed of setting her up in the capital, where she could learn to sing and dance. If successful, she could become a lolly. This was the usual dream of a brother who loved his sister selflessly, a phenomenon not frequent in Tormansian families. For some reason, her brother, more than anything else, had wanted Sju-Te to live long, although he himself had been unable to receive the necessary education in order to become a lolly. While Sju-Te had been making her way to the capital, her brother was seriously injured at work, and he was sent ahead of time to the Palace of Gentle Death. The pitiful property and, most importantly, the savings that he had put aside, awaiting the arrival of Sju-Te, had been stolen by neighbors. Before his death, he had sent Sju-Te a farewell letter, knowing that upon arrival she would go to the post office to receive instructions on how to find him in the capital. And now, Sju-Te held out the yellow sheets. "What do ye intend to do now?" Vir Norin asked. "I do not know. My first thought was to go to the Palace of Gentle Death, but there they will find that I am too young and healthy, and I will be sent somewhere worse than where I came from. Especially because—" She hesitated. "Because ye are beautiful? To say it better, I evoke desire. Is it really difficult to find a good person in such a big city and ask him for help?" Sju-Te looked at the earthling with a shadow of pity. "You really are from afar, perhaps from the forests, which, they say, still grow in the ridges of the Red Mountains and the Cross Ridge." Seeing Vir Norin's bewilderment, Sju-Te clarified, "Men would readily give me money, which would have to be worked off right there." "Worked off?" "Well, yes. Do you really not understand?" exclaimed the girl impatiently. "Yes, yes. And women?" "Women would only insult me and advise me to go to work. Our women do not like those who are young, more attractive to men than themselves. A woman is always an enemy to a woman until she has aged." "Now I understand you. Forgive the Outlander for the stupid question, but maybe you will agree to accept help from me? The girl tensed, deliberating and studying Vir Norin's face. Then a faint grin touched her childish mouth. "What do you imply, saying help? Now we will go to the Hotel Azure Cloud where I stay. There we will find a room for ye until you settle down. We'll have lunch together if ye want to be my companion. Then ye will go about your doings, and I will go about mine. You must be a powerful person if you live in the upper part of the city, in a hotel, and I myself do not know why I am so boldly talking to you. Maybe you mistook me for another? After all, I am an ordinary dim sholi from a distant place, and I have no skills. And what about singing and dancing? A little. Also drawing, but who cannot do that? 3/4 of the city of the center of wisdom. Strange. In our backwoods they sing old songs and dance a lot. And I do not mistake ye for another. I know not a single woman in the capital. How can it be? You are so... Instead of answering, Vir Norin grabbed the girl by the arm, as was customary among the residents of the capital, and promptly led her to the hotel. Sju-Te was quick, dexterous, and immediately adapted to the gait of the astronavigator. They climbed the hill to the yellow with white building of azure cloud, and entered a low lobby so darkened that it was illuminated by green lamps even during the day. Sju-Te needs a room, Vir Norin said to the attendant. Her? The young Tormansian unceremoniously pointed his finger towards the girl. Documents, Sju-Te obediently and excitedly fumbled in a small purse at her belt and took out a red piece of paper. The attendant even whistled and did not want to take it. Wow, and where is the admission card to the capital? The girl, embarrassed, began to explain that her brother was supposed to prepare the card, but he... Does not matter, the duty officer interrupted rudely. Not a single hotel in the city of the center of wisdom will let you in. And don't ask, it's useless. Vir Norin, restraining a seething indignation, completely indecent for an earthly traveler, set out to convince the attendant. However, even the all-powerful guest card of the Council of the Four did not help. I will lose my place if I let a person in without documents. Especially a woman. Why especially a woman? It is forbidden to encourage debauchery. For the first time, Vir Norin felt the oppressive dependence of the Tormansians on any petty boss, usually a bad person. But I can surely have friends over, of course. In your own room, by all means. However, at night the lilacs may come to inspect, and then there will be troubles. For her, of course. Where is she? Vir Norin looked around. In the midst of the argument, he had not noticed how Sju-Te had disappeared. A feeling of great loss drove him to fly out into the street in the blink of an eye, stunning even the seasoned attendant. A sophisticated nervous sensitivity pushed Vir Norin to the left. A minute later he saw Sju-Te ahead. She was walking with her head bowed, still clenching her useless red document in her fist. Never before had Vir Norin felt such shame for the failure to fulfill a promise. And something else mixed with this, something vague and extremely unpleasant, perhaps the sense of ancient male dignity, trampled in the eyes of a lovely woman who had, moreover, found herself in trouble. Sju-Te, he called. The girl turned around. Instant joy flashed in her face, slightly raising the corners of her mournfully folded lips, from the very sight of which the heart of the Earthman grew shy. He held out his hand to her. Let's go. Where? I've already caused you trouble. I see that you are as much a stranger here as I, and you do not know what is allowed and what is not allowed. Goodbye. Sju-Te spoke with heartfelt conviction. Wise sadness shone in her big eyes, unbearable for an earthly person, from birth brought up to fight against suffering. The astronavigator did not wish to use psychic force to subdue the girl to his will, but he had nothing to convince her. We will go to my place. Not for long, until I talk to my friends and find a room for ye, and at the same time for myself as well. Before I was indifferent to the hotel, but now it is repulsive to me. Sju-Te submitted. They entered the lobby again, where the attendant greeted them with a cynical grin. Vir Norin felt the want to punish him. After a few seconds, the attendant slithered up to Sju-Te, handing her the key to Vir Norin's room. On Tormance, all public offices and rooms were carefully locked, a feeble attempt to combat monstrously widespread theft. With a sweet face, the attendant kissed the girl's dusty foot. She was stunned and started to run. Vir Norin caught her by the hand and led her up to the two-room apartments assigned to him, which were considered a luxury among the guests of the capital. He sat his tired and shaken to the depths of the sole guest down in an easy chair. Noticing that she was nervously licking her dry lips, he gave her a drink. Putting his hand on Sju-Te's hot forehead, he calmed her down, and only after that summoned the non-apt from under the bed. The dark plum 382 colored SDP softly hummed. Sju-Te jumped up, looking from the machine to Vir Norin with a mixed expression of apprehension and delight. Vir Norin began to call tail, but found only a person on duty for communication with Earthlings, a like-minded engineer. Vir asked the person on duty to find him a refuge among the lolly. After finishing the conversation, he switched the SDP to reception, sat down next to Sju-Te, and began to question her until he felt that she had calmed down and was only struggling with severe fatigue. It cost little effort to plunge the girl into a deep sleep, obediently curled up in a ball in the chair. Vir himself patiently waited for the SDP to start speaking, also resting before his visit to the workshop of the medical and biological institution. More than 2 hours passed. A barely audible ringing signal rang out, and on the screen appeared an alarm tale, always wary of misfortune. Vir Norin then and there received the address. In the quarters occupied by the houses of the Lali, where a lonely professor of the Association of Architecture lived, there were 2 comfortable rooms at the disposal of the Earthlings. It was inhabited mainly by the technical intelligentsia, among which a significant role was played by like-minded people of tale, from the number of those who had watched the films of the Dark Flame. Sju-Te woke up and looked around, pulling her crumpled dress over her knees. "Go and wash," the astronavigator suggested cheerfully, "and we will go to dinner and then to the apartment. The room has been found, only it will be next to mine." "That will not bother you?" Sju-Te happily clapped her hands. "Not at all, so quickly. Oh, how long I slept. The last 2 nights of travel I was standing in the corridor, I ran out of money. So ye are very hungry. Come on then." They entered the large palace of catering, by Yanyak standards a nice building, with iron-rimmed glass doors and a finish of polished stone. Sju-Te, embarrassed by her light, cheap dress, during these hours women usually wore trousers, pressed herself into a corner and from there watched with curiosity the unfamiliar situation and behavior of the people of the capital. Vir Norin also liked to do this in his free moments. Dinner was served to them. Looking furtively at his companion, he wondered at how beautifully, without greed and without contrived mannerisms, this undoubtedly very hungry girl ate. Just like an inhabitant of Earth. Vir Norin only later learned that Sju-Te had not received upbringing in this regard, and her pleasant manners could be explained by innate spiritual delicacy. Not far from them, by a polished column of gray reconstituted marble, having several times changed tables, a noisy and bumptious company of young people settled down. Vir Norin and Sju-Te could freely exchange impressions without attracting anyone's attention. Between the tables with a dancing gait sauntered a girl in a red and brown dress, unusually well built for a Tormansian. She walked upright and proudly, her intelligent face with a pensive and sad expression was defiantly painted. Among the visitors and women she produced an impression of rareness, but a light swoop of vulgarity concealed her refined demeanor. The feet of the girl, in gold shoes with high heels, stepped lightly and silkenly. "Look, what beautiful legs!" exclaimed Sju-Te. The astronavigator glanced sideways at the small feet of his companion, shod in sandal soles with 2 straps that converged between the big and second toes. Smooth, like those of children, the feet of Sju-Te seemed barefoot and defenseless. She sheltered them under the table and repeated, "Look how sad she is." This is the fate of all beautiful girls. Maybe she needs to be given consolation, as with me. The astronavigator remained silent, thinking that it was not without reason that Sju-Te had paid attention to this particular girl. Both stood out for their seriousness among other young women with their nervous tawdriness and theatrics, considered fashionable in the capital of Tormance. "I feel you are a completely extraordinary person." Maybe, in the eyes of Sju-Te, fright flashed, a disguised serpent-bearer. "Have ye ever heard of even one serpent-bearer who would help the first comer?" Vir Norin smiled. "Never!" The girl brightened up. "But why don't you call me you, as is customary with us?" "Why? I'll explain later." The end of the meal passed in silence. The grown quiet Sju-Te followed Vir Norin in search of the house with the promised rooms. They got lost in the old part of the city with narrow, crooked streets. Vir Norin stopped a Sholi passerby. "Go up and to the right," he said. "You will see quarters of gray houses which seem to be made of bricks. When the dogs bark, you can assume that you have arrived." In the neighborhoods of the houses of the lowly, Vir Norin had before seen many dogs which on leashes were walked by women. Elsewhere in the city he had not noticed any pets. For in Earthland there was no doubt that the dogs had been brought here from their home planet. Their striking resemblance to earthly ones could not be accidental. "There are too many dogs here," Sju-Te was surprised. "For what are they? Probably the long-living have time enough to devote some of it to animals. To me always dogs have seemed like prisoners of cramped houses and rooms, suitable perhaps only for cats. And for people, put in Sju-Te. Yes, unfortunately. The most enthusiastic dog lovers are sometimes lonely neurasthenics or people offended by something. For them, the attachment of the dog serves as a support, as if convincing them that also they are for someone higher beings. Remarkable how many-sided this striving to be a higher being, a danger underestimated by psychologists of antiquity. By our psychologists of antiquity? Do you know history? A little. How I wish to know it more. History was for me the most interesting subject at school. The owner of the apartment turned out to be at home. The tall, old lolly bowed deeply to the astronavigator, gently shook the hand of Sju-Te. In the dark, narrow hallway, Vir Norin noticed a massive front door with several intricate locks. "It is not against thieves," explained the owner. "If they want, they will anyway break in." "Really? Of course. I think not many people realize how helpless we, Lola, are in front of hooligans and thieves. We cannot defend ourselves. Even if we had a weapon, you have to answer for the injury caused, even if you were attacked with a knife. It amazes me how little Sholi still use the opportunities provided to them by the state to break into apartments, beat, insult. Why should the state encourage outrage? Very simple. This provides relief of tension of a dissatisfied life, as well as the appearance of freedom. Thieves are not so scary. They will limit themselves to a few things. Far more dangerous are the eyes of the Lord. They pick up keys, rummage around apartments in the hope of finding forbidden books, songs, personal diaries, letters. And this is all forbidden? Did ye fall from the sky? Oh, sorry, ye actually did." The owner was embarrassed. Vir Norin asked to be taken to their rooms. The quarters, draped with carpets and curtains, seemed very cozy to Sju-Te. Choosing, at the owner's insistence, a room that protruded in the form of a lantern into the street, she with difficulty restrained tears of gratitude. "I know young girls love to dream, observing the passing by life," said the professor unexpectedly, affectionately. "Do ye have daughters?" asked Sju-Te. "Had. She died in the Palace of Gentle Death. She turned out to be Sholi, according to her abilities, and did not want to take advantage of my right." "Which right?" quietly asked Vir Norin. "The right to keep one person from my family, even if he is Sholi. To care for the future old man, still needed by the state. And now there is no one left." Vir Norin changed the theme of the conversation, asking permission to bring the SDP later, so as not to attract attention. The owner approved of this caution. "And ye, Sju-Te," said Vir Norin, "I ask ye not to go anywhere until ye receive cards for full-fledged living in the capital. Do not worry. I will look after her and will not let your bird fly anywhere." Truly, doesn't she look like a Gatau? Vir Norin confessed that he had no idea about this creature. Small, with a black ash head and tail, her breast is cherry, her back and wings are bright blue, azure. "Have you really not seen it?" "No, forgive the old man. I keep forgetting that ye are not ours." Vir Norin noticed that Sju-Te started. Vir Norin reached the institute after dark. The workshop had just gathered. As always, the arrival of an earthling aroused undisguised curiosity. Among scientists, it was especially acute. Vir Norin remembered the warnings of Teo. At every meeting, in addition to the undercover agents of the Council of the Four, speech recording and eavesdropping devices could be installed. The scarcity of resources did not allow accomplishing this at every meeting, but where an earthly guest was present, sound recording was being made for sure. and he decided not to provoke conversations dangerous for the interlocutors. To the surprise of the astronavigator, those present carried themselves unconstrainedly and expressed their opinions rather sharply. Having heard about the tyranny of the oligarchs, Vir Norin was even alarmed. For such speeches, scientists were to be immediately imprisoned. Only later did the psychological subtlety of Choyo-Chaga's policy come to him. Let them speak out. After all, they cannot help but think about the state of society. Let them burst out with empty speeches. But they will not create conspiratorial organizations, the fight against which would lead to undesirable withdrawals from the midst of valuable for the state intelligentsia. The first to speak was a young, ascetic-looking scientist with an angry fire in his eyes and a protruding chin. He spoke about the futility of further development of science. The wider its front became and the deeper the penetration into the secrets of nature, the greater efforts and material costs were required for each step. Rapid advances were not possible for individuals. Cognition turned out to be too many-sided. More and more complex experiments slowed down the progress of research, and in addition, piled up mountains of unused information. With small expenditure of funds on science, there was no hope that it would be able to solve the problems facing it, to penetrate into the deep contradictions of biological mechanisms and social development. It turned out that they, scientists, received privileges from the state for what they could not do, that is, they were parasites living on the rent of acquired titles. Fragmented knowledge deepened into questions that were already practically unnecessary, because the reserves of the planet had been exhausted. The scientist ended with an appeal to abandon hierophantic ambition, and that their gazes should be turned to the sky, from where there appeared the starships of mighty civilizations, who had found a way to not plunder the inherited by them nature, and above all, earthlings, fraternally similar to the people of Yanyak. The deputy director, who was sitting beside Vir Norin, shook his head and whispered, "Dangerous speech, very dangerous. There is something that threatens him, serious consequences. Will he be punished by the state? I don't think so. But colleagues will not forgive him for such self-exposure." In front of the table where the council of the workshop sat, another scholar stood up, pale and sullen, and in chiseling words with a venomous mockery, "You cannot call on other civilizations of space for help. They will be conquerors, and we will become their slaves." This was foreseen by the great Ino Kao in the Age of Wise Denial, that is, at the moment of the first contact with alien cultures. Let the earthly guest forgive, but such is the view of a realist, not a romantic dreamer. "I'm not surprised," Vir Norin replied. On Earth, back in the era of the divided world, the famous Chinese scientist Yang demanded that we not answer calls if they should come from other planets. At the same time, the German astronomer Herner said that in establishing communication with other worlds, he sees the last opportunity to avoid all planetary suicide. He meant a war with the use of a most terrible weapon invented by that time by science. The deputy director of the institute, taking the floor, listed the benefits brought to biological medicine by the scientists of the institute: medicine, especially hallucinogenic drugs, and methods of restructuring the psyche. Here is a real refutation of the insinuations of the first speaker that science is not effective in social affairs. Science is directly related to good for humanity. Forgive the outlander, Vir Norin intervened. In what way? Information, no matter how extensive it is, does not in itself generate wisdom and does not help a person overcome their difficulties. The immeasurable human stupidity does not provide the possibility of understanding the true nature of misfortune. We use our machines and chemicals to drive basic solutions to social problems into dull heads. On the instructions of the great and wise Choyo-Chagas, we created a hypnotic snake that reveals the designs of the enemies of the state. Our institute has manufactured machines for saturating the air with powerful sedatives and hallucinogens, an insignificant amount of which can change the train of thought of the most desperate person and reconcile him with adversity and even death. Yes, but science has not even been able to figure out the meaning of human existence. A new speaker suddenly interrupted the deputy director, a man with a sparse and narrow beard similar to the ancient Mongols. People no more understand the purpose of life than the terrible animals of the land and ocean that have disappeared from the face of the planet Yanyach, so I am not inclined to triumph like our highly respected leader. In the eyes of ignorant people, be they Sholi or the upper strata of society, science is always right, shattering the established ideas from the earliest times. They think that science itself is the noblest instrument of man, perverted only by his own malicious nature. that it is the most effective force in life. In short, in their view, we should always follow only the scientific path, the magical one that turns a scientist into a wizard and an oracle. What an irony! We need not even to speak of what a bitter lesson the people on the whole planet Yanyak had to learn thanks to this prejudice. The gap between the people of Yanyak and science was so great that it gave rise to the complete incompetence of the majority of people, who treated scientists with superstitious fear. And we pay them with the absence of the slightest concern for the fate of the people. The deputy director signaled to the presiding officer, who interrupted the speaker. For the second time this evening, the speeches take the unacceptable form of slander against science and its honest laborers. Let us rather listen to our guest, his opinion on science, evaluation of today's statements, although they did not go in the needed direction. Vir Norin got up, apologized if he had understood the speakers inaccurately, and said that he would try to present the opinion of Earthlings about science in the most general terms. Science does not know and cannot know the entire immensity of the world. And the belief that it has already found a solution to all problems will lead to disaster. Only people blinded by dogmatism or uncritical enthusiasm can think so. None of the discoveries, none of the greatest laws, are final. Usually dogmatic minds in mathematics think in terms of the completeness and finality of science, but this is the same as the decision of the historian on the finality and completeness of history. The more our knowledge develops, the more mysteries of nature arise before us. The wealth of the most familiar phenomena is boundless, inexhaustible in its diversity, in the winding paths of historical development. We on Earth view science as an immense work, striving into the distance for billions of parsecs and into future generations for thousands of centuries. So complex and mysterious is the universe, that with the past millennia of development of science, we have lost the arrogance of ancient scientists and have become accustomed to modesty. One of the main principles that we teach our children is, we know only a tiny fraction of that which we should know. A faint noise of surprise passed through the room, but the scientists knew how to listen, and Vir Norin continued. The nature in which we live, and of which we are a part, has been forming for hundreds of millions of years through the historical change of balanced systems. In her present form, this complexity is so great and deep that we cannot play with nature using highly limited scientific data. The winds will be very rare, random, and the losses will be innumerable. For a very long time on Earth, people, succumbing to the desire to take something without labor and effort, for nothing, played on valuables. One of the widespread games was roulette, an easily spinning wheel with partitions surrounded by a fixed dial. A ball was thrown onto the wheel, and the stopping of the wheel or the ball, information on this has not been preserved, near certain numbers on the dial brought winnings. Otherwise, the money was taken by the owner of the machine. In those days, people had no idea about the laws of this gambling machine and, although they suspected all the randomness of coincidences, they continued to play, losing all their property if they did not leave the gambling house in time. Likewise, we cannot play with nature, who for billions of years has herself been playing at random, for this is her method, noticed 7,000 years ago in ancient India and called Raslila divine game. Our task is to find a way out of the gambling house of nature. Only the combination of all aspects of human knowledge helped us rise above this game, that is, above the gods of India. We might also not have time, for in the condensing inferno of our planet, the arrow of Ahriman could cause irreparable damage. I have used a term, perhaps incomprehensible to you, condensation of inferno. In order not to go into explanations, let us define it as follows. When a person clumsily exercises an imaginary power over nature, he destroys the inner harmony obtained at the cost of a quadrillion sacrifices on the altar of life. When we understand that cornflowers and wheat are a unity, then we will take the heritage of nature into kind, understanding palms, said one scientist. This, in the most general terms, is the attitude towards science on Earth. What can I say about your science? 3 millennia ago, the sage Efremov wrote that the science of the future should become not the faith, but the morality of society. Otherwise, it would not completely replace religion, and there would remain an emptiness. The thirst for knowledge should replace the thirst for worship. It seems to me that you have these relations turned inside out, and even the cardinal question of eternal youth you were able to solve with an early death. How did I see science in institutes and in today's discussion? It seems to me that its main drawback is neglect of man, which is absolutely unacceptable with us on Earth. Humanism and inhumanity in science go hand in hand. A fine line separates them, and you need to be a very clean and honest person so as not to stray. Moreover, to the measure that humanism develops, it turns into inhumanity and vice versa. Such is the dialectics of any process. Saving life by any means turns into a cruel mockery, and the PGD then becomes a beneficence. But from another side, who could argue about the inhumanity of the PGD? You conduct experiments on animals and prisoners, but why do you not go through the psyche, which is immeasurably richer and broader than any chemical agent? Why do you not protect the psychic atmosphere from spite, lies for the sake of anything, from confused thoughts and empty words? Even the most important scientific theories are spiritually and morally at the level of Stone Age thinking if they are not translated into the conscious wisdom of human morality, just as many discoveries were prophetically foreseen in ancient Indian and Chinese philosophy. The existence of a psychic atmosphere became known back in the EDW when one of the greatest scientists on Earth, Vernadsky, named it the noosphere. Thousands of years before Vernadsky, the ancient Indians approached the concept of the noosphere. They gave an even more complete definition, the Celestial Chronicle of Akasha. It included, as it were, a historical record of events on the planet, reflecting the feelings and achievements of the arts. Vernadsky considered the noosphere to be filled with only the necessary ideas and facts, that is, information from science alone. However, to Vernadsky belongs another great idea, the ignoring of which almost ruined our common homeland Earth and has led to a catastrophe with you on Yanyak. Proceeding from the dissymmetry of the volume, space, occupied by a living organism, its rightism-leftism, the asymmetry of phenomena when rotating with the sun and against it, Vernadsky determined the dissymmetric cause of these phenomena, Curie's principle, and the special geometry of the space of life. Rightism-leftism cannot be created in any other way. Hence, the irreversibility of the phenomena of life is obtained, for the space of a living organism can only have polar vectors, a vector of time or a vector of death. In other words, living things are built exclusively according to the principles of dialectical development. The Loschmidt constant is known, the magnitude of atomic complexes and the limiting velocity of wave-like motion in a gas or water atmosphere of respiration. This number is conditioned by the size of the planet and the properties of its dead matter. Therefore, there is a limiting amount of the mass of life, living matter, that can exist on a given planet. This number is a constant quantity that fluctuates little in geological time. Violation of this constant leads to mass extinction. But let us return to the noosphere. It is necessary to take care of it more than the atmosphere, and ye have neglected both of them. Your hospitals are designed without understanding the psychological impact of the environment. I wonder how people recover in them. Oh, how they do recover, assured the deputy director. I understand. The people of Yanyak are not like taut strings, as we earthlings are, and they more easily endure infernal conditions. They have no other choice. We would very soon pay here for our speed of reactions, tension of feelings, and load of memory. The good deeds mentioned here, in my opinion, are murderous and not justified by any need of the state. The sedatives that reconcile people with the shortcomings of life are like a scythe that cuts off everything at the root, flowers and weeds, good and bad. Apparently, your biological science is aimed at suppressing inner freedom in order to superficially standardize individuals, that is, create a crowd. All the studies you listed oriented precisely in such a direction. How can you select the beautiful and weave garlands of human destinies from it? Help people find and appreciate everything that is bright in life. If you suppress emotions, destroy the soul. After the terrible shocks and dehumanization of the EDW, we began to understand that it is really possible to destroy the soul, that is, the psychic I of a person, through external and self-exalting intellect heaviness. It is possible to deprive people of normal emotions, love, and psychic upbringing, and replace all of this with conditioning of the thinking machine. Many such non-humans appeared very dangerous because they were entrusted with scientific research and supervision of real people and nature. Having invented the mythical image of the Prince of Evil, Satan, man himself became him, most especially for animals. Imagine for a moment hundreds of millions of hunters who kill animals just for pleasure, giant slaughterhouses, experimental vivariums of institutes. Then a step to man himself, and hecatombs of corpses are growing in concentration camps. People are peeling off skin and weaving ropes and rugs from women's braids. This happened. Humanity of the earth will not hide from this and always remembers the era of evil justified by scientists. Indeed, the deeper the knowledge, the more harm can be done. At the same time, methods were invented for creating biological monsters, such as brains living in solutions separately from the body, or connecting parts of a person with machines. In general, the same path led to the creation of non-humans, which of all feelings would only have the desire for unlimited sadistic power over a true human, inevitably caused by their enormous inferiority. Fortunately, we stopped these insane intentions of the newfound Satanists in time. "Ye contradict yourself, messenger of earth," said someone, stretching out a thin neck, on which sat a large head with a flat face and angry, narrow eyes like slits. "Now nature is too merciless, playing with us in the cruel game of evolution. Now man, moving away from nature, makes an irreparable mistake. Where then is the truth? And where is the satanic way, dialectically, in both? While nature keeps us in the hopelessness of inferno, at the same time raising from it by evolution, she follows the satanic path of ruthless cruelty. And when we call for a return to nature, for all her wonderful lures of beauty and false freedom, we forget that under each flower there hides a snake. And we become servants of Satan using this ancient way. But, rushing to the other extreme, we forget that man is a part of nature. He must have her around him and not violate his natural structure, otherwise he will lose everything, becoming a nameless mechanism capable of any satanic action. One can walk to the truth along the edge between two false paths." "Wonderfully said," cried the first speaker. "Let my colleagues, scientists of Yanyak, forgive me if I have failed to express the wisdom of the Earth, combined with the gigantic knowledge of the great circle of the galaxy. After all, I am just an astronavigator. Only the absence of other, more worthy people makes me speak before you. Do not think that I am filled with pride in the immeasurably wide outlook of the science of our world. I bow my head to the heroic pursuit of knowledge on a lonely planet cut off from all. Each step of yours is more difficult than ours, and therefore more valuable, but only under one absolute condition. If it is aimed at reducing the suffering of mankind of Yanyak, at rising from the inferno. This is our only criterion for the value of science." Vir Norin bowed deeply to those present, and they were silent, perhaps stunned, perhaps indignant. The deputy director of the institute thanked Vir Norin and said that maybe earthly wisdom is great, but he did not agree with it. It was necessary to continue the discussion, which was very important. "I also disagree with ye," the astronavigator smiled, "following earthly wisdom. Once upon a time, on our Earth, there were many discussions on millions of issues. Millions of books were published in which people argued with their opponents. In the end, we became entangled in the intricacies of semantics and syllogisms, in the jungle of millions of philosophical definitions of things and processes, the most complex ligature of mathematical research. In literature, there was an analogous process of piling up of sophisticated verbal quirks, piling up of empty forms that did not contain anything. And the fragmented consciousness in the snares of these invented labyrinths gave rise to equally senseless, fantastic creations of fine art and music, where all the authentic features of the surrounding world were subjected to monstrous distortion. Add to this that the schizoid fractured psyche inevitably repels itself from reality, demanding withdrawal into its own world, the world of the offspring of a diseased brain, and you will understand the power of this wave in the historical path of humanity on Earth. Since then, we have been wary of sophisticated discussions and avoid unnecessary detailization of definitions, which are generally unnecessary in a rapidly changing world. We have returned to a very ancient wisdom expressed in the Indian epic Mahabharata several thousand years ago. The hero Arjuna says, "You confuse me with contradictory words. Talk only about how I can achieve good." "Hold on!" shouted the deputy director. "Ye, what? Consider mathematical definitions unnecessary. Mathematics is needed only in its place, very narrow. Ye yourselves expose yourselves to hunger, disease, and spiritual impoverishment for neglecting man and nature, for 3 disbeliefs: in the possibility of fighting pests and increasing fertility by purely biological means instead of chemical, in the possibility of creating a full-fledged artificial food, in the great depth of thought and spiritual forces of man. Ye have alienated yourselves from the true cognition of the complexity of living nature, donning a chain of one-sided and dangerous linear logic and turning from free thinkers into slaves of narrow scientific disciplines, shackled by your own invented methods. The same primitive belief in the power of sign, number, date, and word dominates you in works and formulas. People who consider themselves to have cognized the truth shield themselves with essentially the same superstition that is found in primitive slogans and posters for the Shuli. The ancient Indians had a parable about a powerful sage, at whose will everyone crawled before him. But the sage did not have foresight and was torn apart by a man-eating tiger who attacked suddenly, when the sage had not had time to concentrate his will to repel evil intent. Therefore, your protest should not become similar to the meeting with the tiger, but will be effective only after analyzing the situation. I still know very little about your planet, but so far I have not seen real science here. That, which here it is called, is only technology, narrow professionalism, which is as far from selfless labor in the cognizing of the world as a craft skill is from true mastery. Ye compete in ephemeral applied discoveries, of which hundreds of thousands are made every day. This, of course, is both important and necessary, but it does not constitute the whole science. Contrary to popular beliefs among you, Yanyak does not suffer from lack of technology or from its excess. You have a surplus of techniques in large centers and a shortage in peripheral towns, which results in extremely uneven use and inept handling. Synthetic cognition and enlightenment of the people are not even considered mandatory components of scientific research, but these are, after all, the main pillars of science. Therefore, the result is that heap of cheap information of early discoveries, obtained without thought and long selection, which does not allow you to peer into the vast expanses of the world of knowledge. At the same time, the arrogance of young researchers, essentially ignorant technologists who imagine themselves to be scientists, reaches the point that they dream of reorganizing the universe without even coming close to understanding the complexity of her laws. "Exaggeration!" shouted the deputy director. "Absolutely correct," agreed Vir Norin, and rejected attempts to challenge him on the assessment of the scientific activities of the Institute. He went out into the street, with the usual pleasure of leaving a poorly ventilated building. Already approaching was the Tormansian early night with its deep, starless darkness, in which a dull gray moon was sinking. A street lamp burned on the corner above the cube of a kiosk selling intoxicating drinks. There was a crowd of men. Hoarse swearing was heard. The breeze brought a mixed smell of drink, tobacco smoke, and night. Vir Norin came to the Azure Cloud Hotel, woke up the SDP, and led it down a side staircase to the street. Then he looked around the uncomfortable haven for the last time, and happily thought of an apartment with many locks, and of a meeting with Sju-Te Tender as the memory of her. Walking, accompanied by the non-aphead, along the deserted alley of an emaciated square, he recalled the words of the professor about the Gitao and decided he would visit the Museum of Natural History. But when? Tomorrow he would work, as usual, with Teo on the materials sent with the disk. Then there was still a meeting with scientists from the Physics and Mathematics Institute. They yearned for never-before-heard revelations, and he would not be able to tell them anything even from the fields of cosmophysics close to him. An outstanding teacher or popularizer would have been able to bring together the various streams of thought, but not he, Vir Norin. Moreover, this drive for revelation in science was metaphysical. The astronavigator stopped dead. Nearby, his non-aphead whipped up dust. Across the alley stood 6 Tormansians, illuminated by a distant mercury lamp. Vir Norin pondered whether to go to meet them or wait. He was not afraid of anything, even if he had been walking completely alone, and in the presence of SDP there was no danger at all. But he could, on the defensive, inflict damage on the Tormansians, and this should be avoided. "You are earthly?" abruptly asked one of the young people, undoubtedly Sholi, approaching the earthling. Vir Norin nodded in the affirmative. "Then we need you. You have a madly beautiful woman. I saw her in the country garden. Her name is Eviza Tanit." "Eviza Tanit," repeated, or rather sang the Tormansian dreamily. "This is our expedition physician, Starfleet medic." "Wow," exclaimed the Sholi, vaguely. "So she told me to go to your mistress. She also has a beautiful name, not like that of Eviza, but it sounds pleasant, Phyrotis. She told me to definitely talk to her, because it is important both for us and for you. Why, I don't know. But I promised. And it has turned out that I, the well-known Gazerbi Uyem, before whom the Sholi and Loli tremble, cannot fulfill my promise. Lady Faye Rodis is guarded by a whole army of lilac rubbish, and the Loli do not believe me. They think that I am bribed by the serpent bearers. And what use is this bribery to me? Probably it is of no use, Vir Norin smiled. That's it. Could you believe me and arrange a conversation with the mistress? I believe, and I can. When? Now. Let's go where no one is walking, and there is some wall behind which the screen light can be hidden. Now you're talking. The Sholi exclaimed with pleasure and led Vir Norin away from the main alley, where there was a long slab set across the path, dotted with edifying sayings. Such slabs were found in various parts of the city, but Vir Norin never saw anyone reading the inscriptions. Vir knew the routine of the life of Rodis. She was supposed to be upstairs. Indeed, Rodis responded to the call of his SDP almost immediately. She appeared on the improvised stone slab screen, not in the black Tormansian clothing she usually wore in the repository of history, but in a short white dress with blue trim. "Wow!" burst out from the Tormansian, an exclamation of perhaps amazement, perhaps delight. The astronavigator told her about the Sholi seeking a meeting at the request of Eviza Tanit. Rodis called Gzerbi Uyam into the illuminated field of the transmitter, peered at him for several seconds and said, "Come, when and how? Would ye like to now? Go, without attracting attention, to the monument to Almighty Time, turn right from it to the 8th house along the street of the last war. Come alone the first time. How long will it take ye? I will wait for ye and take ye to my place." Rodis cut off the connection, and Vir Norin immediately extinguished his SDP. "Now this is great!" exclaimed Sholi with delight. "How simply everything comes together for real people. Okay, give my regards to Eviza Tanit. It is a pity that I will not see her again." "Why not? When ye come to Rodis, ask her to connect ye to the starship and summon Eviza Tanit." "What? What am I going to talk to her about?" said the Sholi, suddenly frightened. "Well, at least look at her. Actually, yes." "Wow, thanks, friend. I have to go." The Tormansian reached out and squeezed Vir Norin's hand tightly. He smiled. Gratitude from a resident of the capital Yanyak did not come easily. Now, even if the astronavigator once again became entangled in the alleys of the old district of the capital, the keen hearing of an earthling would bring him to the place. The barking of the dogs could be heard from afar, since the dogs were poorly brought up, like their owners. Sju-Te ran into the hall to the clang of the locks being opened. With an exclamation, "Thank you, thank you!" she rushed to Vir Norin and suddenly froze, overcome by shyness. It turned out that she had already received the piece of blue plastic with the necessary signs and stamps, which gave her the right to live in the capital. Vir Norin was delighted to hear the unique voice of the girl, lower than the throaty falsetto voices of the Tormansians, but higher and more sonorous than the chest mezzo-sopranos of the women of the starship. Sju-Te, with the maternal care of the women of Yanya, who were primarily obliged to feed the man, had prepared dinner from the owner's reserves, and was upset to learn that Vir Norin did not eat anything in the evenings, but only drank, and even then, only a certain special drink. If the starship pilot had known what difficulty was connected to the preparation of food for the Tormansians on their primitive heating devices, he would have tried to eat something. But, knowing nothing about hot stoves and ever-soiling pans, he calmly rejected the food. The girl asked permission to come to him when he rested. She had a very important question. The important question was asked as soon as she appeared on the doorstep, and Vir Norin could not shy away or dodge under the open gaze with all its soul demanding the truth. "Yes, Sju-Te, I am not an inhabitant of Yanyak, but from the completely different, immensely distant planet Earth. Yes, I am from the same starship that ye heard about, but we, as ye can see, are not a gang of cosmic robbers and spies. We are of the same blood. Our common ancestors more than 2,000 years ago lived on the same planet Earth. Ye are all from there, not from the white stars." "I knew it!" exclaimed Sju-Te with proud triumph. "You are completely special, and I immediately understood this. That is why it is light and joyful with you, as it has never been in my life." The girl knelt down, grabbed the astronavigator's hand, pressed it to her cheek and froze, closing her eyes. Vir Norin withdrew his hand with gentle care, lifted the little Tormansian woman, and sat her down in a chair beside him. He told her about the Earth, about their appearance here, about the death of 3 Earthlings. In the SDP, there were several starlets for the very first acquaintance with the life of the Earth. Thus began their joint evenings. The irrepressible curiosity and admiration of the lovely listener inspired Vir Norin, driving away the presentiment that had tormented him for some time that he would never again see his native, endlessly beloved Earth. From the first minutes of disembarking on Tormance, he had, with all his skin, felt the unkind psychic atmosphere. General malevolence, suspicion, and especially the stupidest ridiculous envy competed with the desire to stand out from the crowd at any cost. The Earthlings explained the latter by the echo of the former colossal multiplication of the people, in whose billions personalities drowned, forming a nameless and faceless ocean. The psychic atmosphere of Yanyak was like bad water, into which an unwary bather sometimes falls. Instead of calm and freshness comes a feeling of disgust, itching, uncleanness. In the old days on Earth, such places were called evil water. Wherever rivers did not flow from sunny mountains, where streams were not refreshed by springs, forests, and pure rain, but, on the contrary, stagnated in swamps, dead branches and closed bays, saturated with rotting remains of life. Likewise, in the psychic atmosphere, 1,000-year stagnation, running on the spot, the accumulation of unkind thoughts and old grievances leads to the disappearance of fresh water, clear feelings, and higher purpose, where there is no wind of seeking truth and forgiving failures. Probably, being in bad psychic water had given rise to a nebulous sense of a tragic end. Vir Norin recalled the catastrophic consequences which had taken shape on different planets, including on the former, pre-communist Earth, when civilization inadvertently raised to the surface the remnants of archaic periods of the planet's development, harmful to life. Gases, oils, salts, spores of still-living bacteria reliably buried under multi-kilometer strata of geological layers were extracted into the light and again put into the circulation of the biosphere, poisoning the waters of the seas, saturating the soil, accumulating in the air. And so it went on for millennia. Compared to this activity, the dangerous game with radioactive substances in the hour of the bull of the home planet, before the dawn of high society, was short-lived and not so significant. But here on Tormance, people, having destroyed the balance of nature, had moved on to the human psyche, destroying it with the disgusting disorder of life. Like oil and salts from the depths of the planet, here from under the torn cover of education and self-discipline, archaic remnants of animal psychology, remnants of the primitive struggle for survival, rose from the bottom of souls. But unlike the primitive beast, whose behavior was strictly determined by the iron laws of wildlife, the behavior of a not upbrought person is not conditioned. Lack of gratitude towards everything proceeds from the consciousness the world is for me, and is the main mistake in upbringing children. On the other hand, out of envy, a person tries to harm his neighbor, and this neighbor is inured to taking vengeance in all the strength of his bestial inferiority complex. Thus, in the whole life of Tormance, a general and constant anger was inflamed, the sensation of which painfully lashed at the feelings of Earthlings who had grown up in the kind, psychic atmosphere of Earth. All the more striking for Vir Norin was Sju-Te, all glowing with care, kindness, and love, who had somehow, who knew how, arisen in the world of Yanyak. The girl assured that she was not alone, that such were thousands of women on the planet. This frightened the astronavigator, because the suffering of such people on the path of life was stronger than all others. Through the eyes of Sju-Te, Vir Norin saw the depth of soul, which conquered the darkness in itself and desperately defended itself from the surrounding shadow. The vigilant tenderness and wounding pity, once so characteristic of his ancestors and lost as unnecessary in the bright epoch of the communist eras, did not easily grow in the Earthling. On the third day, at breakfast, Vir Norin noticed that Sju-Te was unusually excited about something. Reading in her open soul, he understood her passionate desire to see something that she had dreamed of for a long time, but did not dare to ask him about it. Vir Norin came to her aid and said, as if in passing, that he had a free morning this day and would gladly walk with her wherever she wanted. And Sju-Te admitted that she would like to go to PNEG Kira, not far from the city. Her brother had written to her that there was the place of the greatest battle of antiquity, in which some of their ancestors had died, On Tormance, people did not know their genealogy and promised to take her there no matter what. She wanted to visit this place in memory of her brother, but for a girl alone who did not know the capital well, it was not safe. Vir Norin and Sju-Te climbed into a crowded wagon of public transport, moving through the smoke with a roar, frequent snaps and jerks due to the nervous but rather rude disposition of the driver. Through the dusty windows, one could see the longest monotonous streets. In some places near the house were planted low, half-dried trees. The wagon was unbearably stuffy. Occasionally, after a loud squabble, the windows were opened, hot dust burst into the car, swearing began anew, and the windows were closed again. Vir Norin and Sju-Te stood squeezed from all sides, clinging to the above poles. The astronavigator was peeled away from his companion. He noticed Sju-Te struggling to move away from a young man with a wide nose and an asymmetrical face, who shamelessly pressed against her. Standing in front of her, another, quite a young man with deeply seated fanatic eyes was pushing the girl towards his comrade with his back. Sju-Te met Vir Norin's gaze, flushed with shame and indignation, and turned away, not wanting to involve the earthling in the skirmish with the passengers. Perhaps the memory was too vivid of the insolent hotel attendant who had humiliatingly kissed her foot. The astronavigator understood everything in a split second, took out his hand, and pulled the impudent guy back from Sju-Te. The passenger turned around, saw a tall, strong man looking without malice, and, cursing, tried to free himself. It was not a human hand that had grabbed him, however, but that of a steel machine, so it seemed to him. With animal fear, the Tormansian felt fingers dig deeper into his muscles, crushing and paralyzing the vessels and nerves. His head went cloudy, his knees buckled, and he howled in horror. I'm sorry, I won't anymore." Vir Norin let go of the impudent man, who then shouted to the whole wagon that he had almost been killed because of a girl not worth a penny. To the surprise of Vir Norin, most of the passengers sided with the liar. Everyone started shouting, threatening, waving their fists. "Let's get off as soon as possible," whispered the pale Sju-Te. And they, pushing the people apart, exited onto the deserted, scorched by sun outskirts. Sju-Te suggested going further on foot. Her small legs walked briskly and tirelessly. She sang to the earthling old songs and battle hymns of old years, which differed markedly from the ragged melody of the widespread in the capital songs. Sometimes Sju-Te would stop in order to illustrate a melody through dance, and he admired her figure and the refinement of her movements. Along the dry foothill plain, they imperceptibly walked the remaining 12 kilometers to a stone ridge overgrown with old sparse-leaved trees that provided close to no shade. The sunset side of the ridge broke off in a wide depression of the bottom of a dried lake. There, a faint breeze spired fulvous columns of dust. An obelisk of azure stone, painted with black, deeply carved signs, stood on the border of an ancient battlefield, and unfinished blocks of stone scattered everywhere signified places of common burial. There were many of them. A vast field stretching almost to the horizon had once been dug with trenches and ramparts. Time had destroyed them. The slow-growing trees of Tormance had been replaced more than once on the fertilized by corpses soil, and now, in the thin grid of shadows on the dry, dusty ground, only stones protruded. There was nothing left that reminded of the fury of the gigantic battle, the sea of suffering of the wounded, the horror of the vanquished, thrown into the swampy lake. Dismal terrain, half-dead trees, cracked earth. A hot wind rustled in the branches. Some green insects listlessly crawled at the roots. Sju-Te chose a large, pyramidally pointed stone with fractures that gleamed with the brown-red color of dried blood, and knelt down in front of it. Laying her fingers to her temples and bowing her head, she whispered prayers. Vir Norin waited for her to perform the rite. When the girl got up, he asked, "Who fought here and who defeated whom?" Tradition speaks of a battle between the lords of the head and tail hemispheres. Hundreds of thousands of people died. The Lord of the Head won, and a single power was established on the entire planet. This battle is called the Victory of Wisdom over the Dark-Tail peoples. Did your ancestors take part in the battle on the side of the vanquished? Yes. And if they had won, and not the head, would life be different? I do not know. Why would it be different? The capital would be in Sju-Te, probably. Houses would be built differently, as is customary with us, with towers. Maybe my ancestors would have become serpent bearers. And you would like to belong to this higher echelon? Oh no, to forever be afraid, looking over your shoulder, despising everything, and being hated by everyone? Maybe I'm simply ignorant and foolish, but I would not like to live this way. Better in no way. This, better in no way, permeated the entire consciousness of young Tormansians, who belonged to the class of the Sju-Te and caused an ineradicable fatalism. What for? Seemed to them an invincible argument. Vir Norin once more looked over the scorched plateau. A powerful imagination filled it with the roar of combat vehicles, the screams and groans of hundreds of thousands of people, piles of corpses on the pitted stony ground. Eternal questions, why, for what, against this background, became especially merciless. And the deceived people, believing that they were fighting for the future, for their country, for their loved ones, died, creating conditions for an even greater rise of the oligarchs, an even higher pyramid of privileges, and an abyss of oppression. Useless torment, useless death. With a sigh, Vir Norin turned to his companion. Come on, Sju-Te. The Earthling and the Tormansian came down from the hills. Vir Norin suggested taking a straight cut in the bend of the old road, keeping in the direction of a round hill with an abandoned building, gray and squat, looming dimly in the distance. They quickly reached the hill. The astronavigator noticed that Sju-Te had tired and decided to take a break in the shade of the ruins. Sju-Te lay down on the ground, propping her head on her hands. Vir Norin saw her gazing intently at the wall and frowning as she tried to remember something she had forgotten. Sju-Te jumped up and walked around the ruins. Then she considered for a long time the inscriptions and bas-reliefs, depicting a huge hand extended in a gesture of compassionate help. Having calmed down a little, she again sat down next to Vir Norin, wrapping her hands around her knees in a pose that vividly reminded him of Sju-Te, and for a long time in silence stared into the distance at the mirages of blue lakes that hid the dusty smoke over the city of the center of wisdom. "How old are you?" asked Sju-Te suddenly. "According to your years, which are much shorter than on Earth, 160, or 42 in the number of white stars, the same as on Earth. For you, is this a lot or a little? For the Earth of old, at your level of development, this is middle age, not young and not old. Now, it has moved into youth. I'm 22, 23 years old, and Rhodus, 25. We have a long childhood. Not infantilism, but a prolonged childhood, in the sense of the perception of the world. How old are ye? 80 or 20 by the white stars. I am approaching our extreme age, and I have 5 years left before my time comes to enter the Temple of Gentle Death. And you would have long ago been sent there. No, I'm talking nonsense. You are a scientist after all, and you would have lived here for a long time. You are a lolly. I simply can't imagine this horror. There is no horror. In this there is even good. We do not spend our childhood in stuffy schools, like future lolly who are crammed there with knowledge that is unnecessary for life. And we do not get sick, dying in the flowering of life. Are ye upset, Sju-Te? Look me in the eye. Sju-Te turned onto Vir Norin a sorrowful gaze, as if saying, I see my entire life path to the end. No, she said slowly, to me it's fine, just it is the second time today I meet with ancient death. How? Ye speak of the monument? What was there? Not the monument, but a temple. There was in the epoch of hunger and murder a famous doctor named Sju-Te. He invented the remedy of gentle death. His followers and assistants built this temple of the hand of a friend over a bottomless well of dateless ancientness. Sju-Te said to all the weak, painfully sick, tired of life, persecuted and intimidated, come here and I will calm you. I will give you a gentle death. She will come to you affectionate and beautiful, young and inviting. No one can give the best on the planet now, and ye yourselves have seen the lie of empty promises. And a great many people came to him. In the first room, they washed off the dirt of the road, threw off their clothes, and, naked, entered the second vaulted hall, where, in a gentle sleep, they died imperceptibly and painlessly. The bottomless well swallowed their bodies. The suffering, the loss of hope, of health, of loved ones, did not stop coming, praising the wise doctor. This was a long time ago, and from this beneficence arose the state obligation to die. Palaces of gentle death, the division of the people into Sholi and Loli. Could the sage Sju-Te have foreseen such terrible consequences? I know not, Sju-Te replied helplessly. Nor need ye. Vir Norin stroked her wind-disheveled hair, and she reached out to his face, and her trembling, careful hand seemed to touch the very heart of Vir Norin. He imagined the giant dark walls of inferno that surrounded Sju-Te, behind which there was nothing for her, no support for her faith, her soul. With an effort of will, he fought the vision, smiled, and told her of her intelligence and charm, and how much he liked her. Sju-Te looked at him, trusting and radiant, and stood up elastically and swiftly, like an inhabitant of Earth. They went to the dusky city, and the ringing voice of the Tormansian resounded across the desolate plain. My final year I must embrace, set foot, I've not in one new place, nor have I met a kindly face. The ringing flying melody reminded Vir Norin of something very familiar, heard in early childhood.